Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Nature's Calls podcast. I'm your host, Nature Erdman, and I'm here to break down some expectations for the draft class. Um, and the reason I say it like that is because I've heard a lot of Chargers podcasters and just fans in general. Maybe I'm just being a Debbie Downer a little bit, but really talk about every single player that we drafted, maybe outside of Bridges, having kind of a healthy role in the team. Starter snaps, high expectations, really filling major roles that we lost this year, and I have a hard time believing that. However, I did also dive into the details of some of the draft hits per round and things like that and found some really interesting information that kind of refuted my ideas. So I think that it's worth sharing as well. Shed a little bit of positivity that I discovered while I was digging into all this. So without further ado, let's go ahead and break down the draft picks by round, hit rates, expectations, things along those lines. So let's kind of skim over the first couple rounds. Obviously, hit rates are a little bit higher for second round specifically. They dwindle pretty heavily once they get down to the third round, but um, our two big players, obviously, on the offensive side of the ball, Omari and Hampton and Trey Harris. Hampton, if you go by the numbers, and keep in mind, mostly what I'm going to be reading you guys today is data that I pulled to give you an accurate representation of what we should expect from these players. I've seen a lot of Kyle Kennard's going to replace Joey Bosa's production, or Thule will replace Joey and Kennard will replace Thule. You get what it means, what I mean by the rotation side of things. Caldwell will fill in and do a good job to replace Puna Ford, obviously, that we lost. KLS, people seem to be over the moon with saying he's going to replace QJ. Um, Rondé Gadsden is apparently the second coming of Brock Bowers. Let's not get that carried away here, guys. Branson Taylor hype's getting out of control. RJ Mickens is actually a really fine player, um, but he fell to the sixth for a reason. And obviously Bridges is the seventh round corner. But so let's kind of look at this by round and by player and see how this all kind of breaks down. So let's look at Omari and Hampton. Will become the starter. He's a first round running back. It always happens most of the time, the vast majority of the time. 60% of the time, picks 11 through 20 actually make a Pro Bowl. A running back picked 11 through 20, 60% of the time makes at least one Pro Bowl. 21 through 32, that drops pretty drastically to 42.3%. That's still pretty close to 50-50 odds that he's going to be a Pro Bowl running back at some point. The hit rate on those first round running backs is pretty safe. They don't get taken very often. But keep in mind, the data that I'm looking at is like 2000 to 2020. So it's a good sample size here. Not as much of the recent last few years, but overall, we've got probably around, if I looked specifically in that closer to 15 to 25 range, you're probably somewhere in that 50% Pro Bowl, at least one nomination. So he's going to become the starter. He's probably going to make at least one Pro Bowl. Obviously, we all hope he does more than that, but I'd say the odds are pretty good. There's a little bit of safety there. Now, Trey Harris, not as good of odds, but wide receivers are drafted so heavily in these rounds that there's a huge miss rate on them in general. Like 46% of second round receivers play 0 to 1 season in the NFL. I don't know. Our hit rate feels pretty good in that day two pick. Keenan Allen, Ladd McConkey, Trey Harris. I think we're pretty good on day two. Even Josh Palmer became a rotational to starter role for us. Got a good deal with Buffalo. I'd say that he's doing just fine. So I would say that specifically the Chargers do pretty well in this range. Also, I'm just such a Trey Harris fanboy that I have a hard time believing he's anything besides an excellent pick. So I'm not really even going to touch on that all too much. I'm going to ignore the data on that one because I love me some Trey Harris. Now let's really get into the players that have lower hit rates, rounds 3 through 7. Day, yeah, mostly day three guys, but also the third round listed in there. Because this is where I think people have kind of outlandish expectations. And let's start with Jamari Caldwell. I really like Jamari Caldwell. I think he's got great upside, but from a data standpoint, you get about a 26.5% starter rate in the third round. Now, keep in mind, The average for third rounders in general is 28 to 30%. So you're just below that for defensive tackles. Actually, one of the lowest hit rates overall in the third round is defensive tackles. That being said, something to consider, defensive tackles have one of the lowest hit rates in almost any round as compared to other positions. It's just a harder position to hit on. Um, my only concern with Caldwell is still the same one it has been from day one. Will he play to a second contract or into a second contract? I don't know. I don't really care that much. If we get 4 solid years of starting caliber play out of him, I'm happy. Um, I worry that he's going to be an early retirement type of guy just based off of his history and the way he presents himself in press conferences. So either way, I think that we've got a really solid. I mean, a 1 in 4 chance of him becoming a starter. It is what it is. It's the third round. Your hit rate is not as good as people like to pretend that it is, and so we'll see what we can do. We really need him to play a starter position. I think he's one of the more well developed prospects. I think that's a good thing that the Chargers have done overall is pick more finished products. Um, Coming in and not as much of project players. That was a big Telesco thing. Was he loved to draft and develop, but we couldn't develop. So that didn't work out so well for us. So yeah, I think Caldwell could actually end up being a really nice starter for us in the short term. Long term is yet to be determined. Now, this is where it starts to get real juicy because this is where I start hearing the most chatter. Is Kyle Kennard. Now, know he won SEC Defensive Player of the Year. I know that people are extremely high on him. He's not. This is by far the biggest project to me, or one of the biggest projects to me. Um, I just have a hard time believing that he comes in and immediately makes this big contribution. Like, yes, I think he's an upgrade. He's a upgrade over Chris Rumpf, and I feel bad just even saying that. Um, he's very one dimensional, man. He's very one dimensional as a pass rusher. He's very one dimensional as a defensive end, or edge rusher, whatever you want to call him. On the outside of that defensive line, it's hard to see it to me at the next level. Now, who could he be a designated pass rusher and could he develop? Absolutely. Could he learn from some of these great technicians? Absolutely. Is he going to be able to put on the size necessary to hold and set an edge in the run game? I don't see it. Is he going to develop his body and be big and strong enough to have a strong bull rush? I don't see it. I like him. And I think he could have a rotational role with the team. I do not ever see him taking over as Edge 2. I am so sorry, those of you who continue to put him on a pedestal. I don't see it. I think the Edge position is, and a lot of people will agree with this, but a huge priority going into next year and still a weakness on our team this year. Thule and Mack is a great first two. Um, but after that, man, and you need depth at edge. We just don't have strong depth at edge. And we'll kind of touch on the full roster here in a minute, some just concepts that I have. Um, because the depth I feel like is a strength of this team. Quality, not so much, but we'll talk about that. But one thing I will say, and this is kind of where it gets funny. This is where I came into. I'm going to be a Debbie Downer episode, and come in with a bunch of bad news because if you look at the fourth round or fourth round, you have a 20% hit rate. Kyle Kennard is probably not going to be a starter. Came in with all this negativity. I pull it up, and defensive ends specifically drafted in the fourth round, specifically defensive ends, have a 30.65% start rate. That is amazingly the highest hit rate out of any player to become a starter in the fourth round out of any position. Out of any position, if you're going to draft one player in the fourth round and the odds of them becoming a starter being high, it's defensive end. Who'd have thunk it? Feels like edge rushers, offensive linemen, quarterbacks, you have to take them early. Yeah, that's pretty accurate with edge rushers, or no, sorry, with quarterbacks. Offensive linemen kind of scattered throughout. Obviously, tackles are more specific to the first round, but yeah, it turns out the best round to draft a defensive end is in the fourth. So some silver lining, if anything, there. I came with all my negativity. And sure enough, if there's any position that has the highest percentage of becoming a starter in the fourth round drafted, it's edges. 19 out of 62 drafted since 2000 to 2019, 2020-ish. Crazy. Crazy. So, college Kennard truthers, you might have something going. I might be all wrong. Hope I am. KLS, fifth round wide receiver. Not going to dive into him too much. I think he's a great gadget player. I think he has a great role in this offense. I think he's a slightly better version of Jalen Guyton. I do not see him as a bona fide starter, but I think that he does a lot of things that we desperately need in the deep side of the field. 8.6% hit rate on wide receivers in the fifth round. Wide receivers have a low hit rate in every round. I'm not going to dive too much into it, but I will say overall, fifth rounders have about a 15% hit rate, which is draft total average is about 15%. So odds aren't super high, but I don't think we're looking for him to be a starter. I think most of us are smart enough to see that he's not going to be an every down player. But I do think he has a role in this offense. Oronde Gadsden, and this is another one I want to kind of highlight because people are talking about him like he is otherworldly, and he is excellent as a weapon. But he fell to the sixth round. I know we traded up for him, or fifth round. Sorry, we traded up an extra six pick to get him in the fifth round. But I know that people are very high on Oronde Gadsden. I do think he's awesome. He's a very incomplete tight end. He's very much just a big wide receiver, a big slot. He has the NFL body, I think, to put on the size to be a capable blocker. Is he ever going to be a world beater? No. Travis Kelce is a top 5 all time tight end, and he's a very mid blocker. He's just willing to throw his body out there, and he had the size to do it. That's good enough in the NFL if you're that good as an offensive weapon. So, not saying that Arnold Gadsden can't do that. Like, I really, for some reason, I watch him and he reminds me of Jimmy Graham. Is his ceiling. His ceiling is Jimmy Graham, prime Jimmy Graham. I'm not saying he's going to become that. I think he right now is probably about what Stone Smart was last year as a receiver. I don't see him getting involved tremendously in the offense in year one. Prove me wrong. Follow the Isaiah Likely career arc and become a stud weapon in year two. All positive things for me. I would love that. Still a fifth round pick, still a 15% hit rate. But again, just like Kyle Kennard, I was very much proven wrong here. Now you look at the fifth round prospects, average hit rate 14.91% to become a starter. Now, specifically tight ends, 26.5% hit rate, higher than any other position in that round. 26.5% hit rate. 13 out of 49 tight ends drafted in the fifth round to become starter. Like, maybe we're looking at analytics a little bit. Because the choices here are very specifically odd. Like in almost every round, we're picking above the average. Now, obviously, cornerbacks and wide receivers are below the average most of the time. Just so many of them are drafted. So many of them don't work out. But yeah, very. You look at a 15% hit rate, and there's a 27% hit rate for tight ends specifically in that round. Crazy. Might be onto something here. So again, I'm trying to come in with a little bit of rain on this parade, but of course, every cloud has a silver lining. So I might be wrong here, boys. You might be onto something. Still need to temper expectations. He's not Brock Bowers. And then we get into the final three. Branson Taylor, seen a lot of people high on. You look at the sixth round, you have a 8.7% hit rate of people becoming starters. And somehow offensive line is the highest position, 15.63%. Average at 8.7% in the sixth round. And somehow offensive line is 15.63. 20 out of 128. It's not bad numbers. I don't see it with Branson Taylor. He's just not my favorite offensive line prospect. I think when you look at late offensive linemen, you're usually looking at interior guys, which is obviously he's converting from tackle to interior, or you look at centers that have succeeded well at those higher rates, at those higher levels. But I mean, it's the second most drafted position in that round. DBs at 150. There's 128 offensive line drafted in this time frame. 150 DBs. Much lower hit rate. You look at wide receivers, going to be the next lowest down from them, down from 128 all the way down to 98. Only a 5% hit rate. Maybe we're onto something here, boys and girls. Maybe we're onto something here. You pick specific positions to draft in specific rounds, and maybe it'll work out. Now, still temper your expectations. When I say becoming a starter and you're at 15% hit rate, the odds of them becoming valuable to our team are still quite low. Please do not think that Branson Taylor fixes anything on the offensive line. I know most of you don't, but please just take it into consideration. And then real quick, let's rip through the last two. This video is already getting long. RJ Mickens, DB, in the 6th round. DBs are never good hit rates just about in any single round, so I'm not going to sit here and make a big deal about it. RJ Mickens is a stud. He's brought in to be a special teamer. He's going to be a solid special teamer. I have a lot of faith in that, especially with the new kickoff rules. I like safety as one of those positions that you're bringing in to play on special teams. 7.3% hit rate on defensive backs. 8.7% overall, one of the higher percentage-wise hit rates for defensive backs. They do not separate safeties and corners, so it's hard to really necessarily say on that one. I think he's going to play a good role. Overall, 11 out of 150 have become starters. I don't think RJ Mickens is here to be a starter, but happy with him on the team. Still happy with that pick. Picking in the 6th round, there's only so much success you're going to have. And last but not least, Triquez Bridges, 5% hit rate on DBs. Not going to dive too much into it. Both of those last two guys are picked to be special teamers, but I do just want to highlight, let's temper expectations on 3 major guys that I hear the most hype about: Kyle Kennard, Aronde Gadsden, and Branson Taylor, and honestly KLS to some extent too. Let's temper expectations on those guys. Hit rates on these are not high. We cannot hit on every single prospect. It's just not going to happen. We would become the best team in the NFL in 2 years' time if that was the case. Trust. But let's just temper expectations a little bit. That being said, if there's a silver lining here, analytics are in our favor on these selections that we did make. So I know today was a lot of numbers, not so much opinion, but I still wanted to share this with you. I found it valuable. Hopefully you did too. Thanks for tuning in. If you like what you heard, please give me a follow on Twitter or X at Erdman Chargers. Or if you're not already there, go ahead and hop over to my YouTube channel, like or subscribe at Nature's Calls Pod. Thanks for listening.